The European Union are currently facing a new crisis over their net zero targets as a number of key member states are rebelling against Ursula von der Leyen. Oh, how they told us that this is a family of united, friendly neighborhood people. They all love each other. All the 27 member states are united and they work together. And cooperation across the continents of Europe is flawless because they hide all the division, all the attacks that they have on each other. And every time a key big project happens from the Commission, led by people like Ursula von der Leyen, it exposes the reality of the European project. So, net zero. They have these tough targets in Europe, whether it's 2030 or 2035 when it comes to eliminating cars, the old school cars, diesel and everything else like that. And they've been planning this for such a long time. And now some of the member states, some of the key member states, and we're going to talk about this in this video, are rebelling. It's going to be absolutely fascinating. It's going to expose the whole shenanigans that they always have. Anyway, before we start, don't forget, last reminder, this Saturday, 11th of March at 1 p.m, we're going to be in Manchester as part of our events. It's going to be hosted by Nick Buckley. We're going to talk about that. We'll talk about that at the end of the video. But first, let's talk about what's going on in the EU. So, they planned all these things about stopping the sales of cars by 2035 unless you are now forcing yourself to buy the new electric cars. And they got everything sorted, and it got to the end where at this point it's basically formality. The European Parliament voted for it, the Council has basically voted for it, but now countries are pulling out. And they said it is exceedingly rare, once the legislation has been negotiated with Parliament and backed by both members of the European Parliament and the Council, that we see a bit of a pushback. I wonder why. It's because those countries, and we're going to talk about which countries, their governments and politicians are now under pressure from their own voters because they could lose their seats if they implement policies like this without actually slowly going through a transition. So the European Union politicians, because nobody votes for them, they don't have any fear. They're not going to get booted out. They could do whatever they want. But there are still 27 member states in Europe, in the EU, that have to still be afraid of the voters and losing their seats. And that is why this issue is happening. The 4 countries include Italy, Germany, Poland, and Bulgaria. Ironically, Germany, considering Ursula von der Leyen is actually from Germany and she's now the head of the EU, the reason is very obvious because they are under pressure from the car manufacturers in their countries. They're under pressure from the working classes who can't afford to change their cars and get an expensive electric car without even having the infrastructure for the electric charging points across their countries. So they haven't even thought about any of this, and they expect you to completely change your lifestyle and go through bankruptcy potentially. The 4 countries represent around 42% of the EU's population, easily over the 35% threshold needed to block the legislation. So by just having these 4 countries, it could completely stop and block this net zero target, which will be very, very problematic for Ursula von der Leyen and the European Commission, because the whole of their existence for the past few years has been built on net zero. It's been built on the new world. And if they can't get it done, 2 things could happen. Either this will be the domino effect that could bring down the EU, not necessarily in a very dramatic way, in regards to undermining the credibility of it and the authority of it, and it might have to devolve into a more of a downgraded version of a European community, or it might accelerate authoritarianism from the European Commission. They might have to be forced to essentially do coercion and implement these policies without getting the consent of the member state, which again will be a bit of an issue because medium term and long term, the backlash will be even worse on the European Union. All the people in Italy, in Poland, Bulgaria, or Germany are going to be even more angry at the whole of the European project, because at this point they can still think that if we put pressure on our politicians, they can go to Brussels and stop this. If they then see that even that doesn't work, then they're going to be sick and tired of this nonsensical European Union. Now, when it comes to Meloni, who's the Italian prime minister, who's very robust on these issues, she's very Eurosceptic, she's not having any of it. Meloni has vowed to forcefully oppose the car ban plans, arguing that they are deeply damaging to the manufacturing sector. And of course, especially when it comes to people like Giorgia and Meloni, who were elected to make Italy great again, essentially, to make sure that they support the industries, they support the working classes. She can't really go against her own words. She can't really back down. She has to. She was elected. That's her mandate. So definitely they've lost Italy. Then Italy is not going to make a U-turn. Germany is different. Ursula von der Leyen has already booked a couple of meetings to go back to Berlin to have conversations with German politicians, and considering she's German, they could make some sort of backroom deal. She could probably bribe the manufacturing sector in Germany to give them some sort of subsidies or some sort of support, state support, to shut them up. So I can easily see Germany potentially backing down. Of all the four countries, I could see, because of the obvious links between Berlin and Brussels. But even that is difficult to see at this point. So the European Union might have to amend their policy, their net zero target. They might have to delay it. And that's the only way you could do it. You shouldn't have even thought about implementing or introducing these net zero targets so robustly and so instantly, so short term. How are you expecting the world to change that quickly? And they're still making their money anyway, they're the big green lobby. But this is the reality. But we're going to keep an eye on this story and all the other issues as usual. Don't forget, the link is in the description if you want to come to Manchester this Saturday, 11th of March at 1 p.m. Book your tickets as soon as possible if you could make it. And then we're going to be there talking about the political establishment and the mainstream media and all the other issues. And you could be engage with us and have any questions that you have with me or others as well at the event. Anyway, we're going to take a quick break. We're going to come back in half an hour. I'm Mahyar, Tousi, and we are the media.